I'm Ann Charles.
I'm Linda Quinlan.
Hi, I'm Keith Ghostland. This is All Things LGBTQ. We are taping on Tuesday, January 15th, and we've got headlines.
We do. The mayor of Gdansk, Poland, was stabbed on Sunday. His name is Paweł Adamowicz. I have a picture of him moments before he was stabbed at a charity event. He's 53. All of Poland is in mourning. Iraq bulldozes the building used by ISIS to throw gay men to their deaths.
Oh, thank you.
Gay men tortured with lit cigars and boiling water in Chile as part of homophobic attacks. 2 stories from the Netherlands. Good news from Cambodia. Cameroon, bad news there. Youths disrupt the Pride event that was planned and burned down the advocacy office. Golden Globes hit a new low. The annual peace procession held by transgender Indians. I have a clip of that to show you later. And then stories I'm not going to get to. 2 gay men mount the first legal challenge to Hong Kong laws banning same-sex marriage. Lithuania's top court orders recognition of same-sex gay spouses. And finally, the Israel Medical Association bars its members from performing conversion therapy.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, and we have some news headlines. I'm going to give a few, just a short, and then I won't talk about them again. But Britney Spears is to receive the prestigious honor for her LGBT community support from the 29th Annual GLAAD Media Awards in Los Angeles. Amelia Mallory protests with a love rally against a church in Lake Shastina in Northern California, which read, "Bruce Jenner is still a man and homosexuality is still a sin." But it seems like the demonstration went well because the congregation kicked the minister to the curb. So he's done. Tiffany Folsom comes in second on Bravo's reality competition Top Chef. Presidential hopeful Tulsi Gabbard, who just declared her run for the presidency, has made some has made some anti-LGBTQ statements in the past.
That's not her only error. She met Assad in Syria. I mean, she's got a lot to apologize for.
Yeah, and so far we haven't heard anything from her in terms of an
apology
apology.
may extend past the 2020 election.
Kevin Hart said being offended by anti-gay jokes is a choice.
Oh, that's awful.
I know. He lost his bid to be the host at the Academy Awards and also says that he is done with talking about it.
I'm done talking about him.
I know. And I hope what's her name is too.
Ellen DeGeneres.
Ellen DeGeneres, yeah. RNC official Bruce Nash went on a misogynistic tirade against bisexual congressional-elect Kristen Sinema from Arizona. Nash said, "Senator Madonna, elected by dumbasses in her state," which is Arizona. He also objected to her not using the Bible while being sworn in by Pence.
She had the Constitution.
You have a picture of that?
No.
Yes,
Yes, actually I do. And you can see a picture of her now.
Wallet size?
Huh? Wallet size.
No.
No. I'm sorry, I went right over my head.
And Mike Pence,
Yes.
toe to toe.
And she also, this is an interesting thing, she also didn't declare herself religiously affiliated. And what's interesting about it is that she is the first person to do this. No other person has said that they are not religiously affiliated.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Teen charged with the murder of a 24-year-old in Chicago. She was dating 17-year-old Tremont Hill, and he shot her and left her body in a secluded area on the south side of Chicago. So we have more stories in length, and we will move to
Local,
Local,
our backyard.
our backyard.
So in Massachusetts, there's an agreement. Mutual of Omaha has agreed that they will no longer deny coverage to people who use PrEP, the prophylactic
Well, that's
for
good.
HIV. Well, they were denying health insurance, long-term care, and life insurance if you took PrEP. Vermont Supreme Court, they recently issued a ruling that the police could be subject, or law enforcement could be subject to civil penalties or a civil suit. We'll talk a little bit more about it. Burlington High School. Not only do they have a gender-neutral bathroom, they have a gender-free locker room. We'll talk more about
Good.
that. And we're going to talk probably a fair amount about former Representative Kaya Morris, Bennington, the racial harassment that she and her family had to endure, the press conference that happened yesterday where her harasser showed up, and some new protocols that the Attorney General is trying to put in place to respond to bias and hate crimes in Vermont.
Did he use different names, or was it just basically one?
No, he clearly identified who he was.
Mm-hmm.
He openly admits that, yes, indeed, he has been doing it.
And he's a Vermonter.
Because, yes,
Okay.
he is from Bennington.
Okay.
I mean, initially he said, why is a woman of color representing a predominantly white district? That was his starting point, and it went downhill from there.
Okay.
So, did you hear? They discovered a new moth. It's indigenous to the coastal United States and Mexico.
This is moth the insect.
Moth, the insect.
Because I thought when you first said
Yeah.
it was
It's
moth
at
the
NPR, you know,
program.
has moth, which
Okay.
is storytelling.
No,
Okay,
no.
go ahead.
Well, this could be some story. And Zach will be putting up a picture. As you will see, the moth has yellow scales on the top of its head.
Ah,
And it has been named Neopulpa Donald Trump Eye because it also has an unusually small penis. Thank you, Stormy Daniels. So, for events coming up, if you're watching us, you're not at Dana and Aaron's Contra Dance, which happens at the Capital City Grange, but there will be one on February 2nd. And remember, this is Larks and Ravens, gender-neutral calling. They happen on the 1st, 3rd, and if there is a 5th Saturday in the month, starts at 8 o'clock, come early and they will give you some instructions. And they're asking for donations because they have some expenses they
Yep.
need to meet. And this week's trivia. We won't talk about how they did this time. Here's the quote. You were close, though.
ah.
Here's the quote. There's no place for the state in the bedrooms of the nations. What's done in private between adults does not concern the criminal code. Who said it and in what year?
All right.
Well, let me start with some violent news. Let me pick up on the Gdansk assassination and just add that this mayor was very popular and is being mourned by the whole country. He was also known as a supporter of gay rights and had campaigned for the rights of immigrants in a country whose governing party has leaned heavily on anti-immigrant rhetoric. So thousands have protested and hate speech and hate crimes.
Do you know if
and-
he's still alive? I know
No,
he
he's
was
dead.
alive. He is dead.
died.
Okay.
They operated
said
for 5 hours.
assassinated.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But they couldn't
Save him.
revive him. One more violent story accompanied by a picture. Iraq has finally decided to bulldoze a building used by ISIS to throw gay men to their deaths. But there's no plan to build a memorial to the LGBTI victims of the Islamic State. Many men accused of being gay were being thrown off a 7-story building that was once home to the National Insurance Company in Mosul. The building, ravaged by the battle to end IS rule, will be removed. IS were finally wiped out from Mosul in the summer of 2017. A new government building will likely take its place. There are no plans to build a memorial, as I said. Under IS or Daesh rule, hundreds of gay men were murdered in Iraq and Syria. IS members had previously referred to gay people as the worst of creatures. The executions typically followed a pattern. It is believed the extremists would drug the victim. They would then blindfold them, cuff their hands behind their backs, and lead them to the top of a high building. A mob would await the execution, and I have a picture now before you of a man being pushed over the top of a building. A mob awaited the execution. The killers would then announce that the man was found guilty of homosexuality. They'd hurl him off the edge. If the victim survived the fall, a crowd gathered and stoned him to death. So it's a terrifying sight. A resident of Mosul said, "It reminds me of the death penalty. Daesh would mete out against innocent people by throwing them off the roof." So they're going to get rid of the building. I think that's probably a good move. One more violent story. 2 gay men were tortured in separate horrific homophobic attacks in Chile on New Year's Day. One man, David Munoz Vargas, 51, was assaulted and forced to sit in a tub of hot water because of his sexuality, resulting in severe burns, reports the Movement for Homosexual Integration and Liberation. He's in critical condition. Another man, aged 24, who remains anonymous, was assaulted in Valparaiso also on January 1st. The gay organization reports that he was being given a ride by 2 people who attacked him when they heard him speaking to his partner on the telephone. Everything was going well until the young man started talking on the phone with his partner, said the LGBT representative Diego Rios. The assailants began to insult him because of his sexual orientation, as well as beating and torturing him. He added that the man was taken to Laguna Verde, where his assailants lowered him to torture him, put cigarettes in his hands, and pressed his genitals with his hands. Rios said he remembers until the moment when he was hit on the head with a stone and rendered unconscious. The attacks highlight how Chile's LGBT plus community still faces the threat of physical violence despite legislative advances in recent years. These legislative advances include the legalizing of same-sex sexual activity that occurred in 1999. The country also introduced an anti-discrimination and hate crime law in 2012 in a bid to provide protections for the LGBT plus community. A bill to legalize equal marriage was signed by the then President Michelle Bachelet in August 2017 and is awaiting approval from 2 houses of Congress. In November, Chilean President Sebastián Piñera, who took up his role in March, signed a landmark bill into law which allows trans people above the age of 14 to update their name and gender on official records. The law marks a progressive shift in Chile, which is strongly Roman Catholic and became one of the last countries in the world to legalize divorce in 2004. So the laws are there, but the violence continues.
I mean, it sounds very similar to what's happening in Texas with people using Grindr to lure gay men and then
Take them to an abandoned building
Exactly.
and then torturing them,
rob,
beating.
sexually harass, sexually assault, torture.
Yep.
But
Is there time for me to do some more stories, or should we? Well, let's move on to Linda, shall we?
Well, we want to.
apparently, we're moving on to Linda.
And there was news today, just as I was leaving the house, which we talked about, which was the statewide protection for transgender people passes in a historic New York vote. I don't know about the other one. I haven't heard.
Well, and what I had mentioned before we started is that there was a second bill that was going through that would put a ban on the use of conversion therapy.
Yeah.
And
They
that
probably passed too.
Well, people were looking at, they both had momentum. They had both passed out of their committees. And now that the New York Assembly is no longer controlled by the Republicans who were stalling these bills, they're expecting a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll look forward to hearing more from New York. Tiffany Folsom was on the inaugural season of Top Chef and came in second. She now owns, along with her partner Kelly Welsh, 3 restaurants in Boston. So if you get down to Boston, you may want to go to Sweet Cheeks Q.
What was that name?
Sweet Cheeks Q.
Do you know where it is?
I do not.
Okay.
You can Google
We can
it.
look it up, yeah.
Tiger Mama.
Tiger Mama?
Uh-huh.
Tiger Mama.
And Fool's Errand. She was also nominated for the James Beard Award, which apparently is the Oscars of the food world.
Oh, yeah.
So, folks, when you're down there and you're looking for a restaurant, there are 3.
Google them.
You may want to call for reservations.
Yeah, you might, especially since everybody
Use
from the
Linda's
show
name.
will be going. And then we have presidential hopeful Tulsi Gabbard.
No, we don't.
No, we don't.
Well, she has said
She's presented herself.
she has presented herself as a candidate. Once decried homosexual extremist, as state representative, she argued against a bill that would have legalized civil unions for same-sex couples in Hawaii. She said that, as Democrats, we should represent the view of the people, not a small number of homosexual extremists. Her father, Mike Gabbard, was a prominent anti-gay activist in Hawaii. Now 37, she is the first Hindu member of the U.S. Congress and says she now supports LGBTQ causes. She is also a member of the LGBT Equality Caucus. And the Human Rights Campaign has awarded her with a perfect score. But she has yet to address her earlier comments. So.
I don't believe it. But, you know, I'm cynical.
And you said something about she went where?
She met Assad in Syria.
Yeah.
So that's, you know.
And when? Recently or a long time ago? Okay.
Earlier.
Okay.
An apology might be a nice place to start.
Yeah, on several counts.
She needs to address it if she's really going to be a serious candidate in this election. Kevin Frett was an openly gay Latin trap artist, I have a picture, who was shot and killed in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Frett was 25, and he was on his motorcycle at 5:30 at night, I don't know, coming back from somewhere, and he was shot twice. He called himself the reincarnation of Freda Kahlo. Latin trap, for those who don't know, originated in the Caribbean in the mid-2000s, and it mixes Southern hip-hop with local sounds. So,
This is in Puerto Rico?
San Juan. And I hope, is it Jair
Probably.
Bolsonaro? The newly elected president of Brazil once said he'd rather his son die in an accident than be gay. Was visited by Pompeo on Trump's behalf and the behalf of the United States. He also called the birth of his daughter a weakness on his part. Pompeo hails Brazil's new president and met with Pompeo despite his views on...
Met with Bolsonaro.
Yes. And despite his views on homosexual torture and women. So...
You're going to torture the homosexuals with women? Is that what
think
I heard?
I think that would work.
Well, I don't know about that. But, you know, it's this,
Yeah, it's horrible. He's
so
a terrible
Brazil
person.
tortures women?
No.
Or he just has misogynist
Bolsonaro's
views?
a misogynist.
He's a misogynist, yes, and he has made many horrible statements. Like, you know, like, can you imagine saying, I had a daughter and it was a weakness on my part?
Or I'd rather my son be dead than gay.
I know. Out in New Jersey mourns the loss of Toby Grace. He was one of the founders of Out in New Jersey. He died last week, but no cause of his death has been issued. He was an educator, fantasy writer, lover of British history, veteran of the Stonewall area, gay liberation, AIDS, and marriage equality, and I have a picture of him. So
Who isn't a Stonewall veteran at this point?
I know
there are people just
everybody.
It's a
crawling
growing
out.
industry.
Of course I was there.
I'm
So-
old enough to have been there, but I wasn't.
I have no comment. So the Vermont Supreme Court recently issued a ruling, and it was a case that had been appealed from some of the lower courts, and it was a young man of color who was accusing law enforcement of profiling and stopping him without real cause. And he wanted to sue law enforcement. And the question before the Vermont Supreme Court is law enforcement subject to civil penalties? And the answer is yes. So he can now, in lower court, file a suit against the law enforcement agency that did his arrest for financial damages. This may change a little bit of how law enforcement responds to these issues if there's a financial liability that could occur. Makes you think about some of the other cases that we've seen on the news following pulling over. You really wonder if there's just cause.
Yeah.
So the House Judiciary has decided that they're going to bring in some of the key players, and they want to review what's going on with fair and impartial policing. What are the statistics? Is the percentage of people of color being stopped in correlation with their percentage of the population? And then the other piece that they were looking at, or have been looking at, is if you get stopped, how often does it result in a ticket versus a warning? So those are some things that are going to be very telling. The other story that was interesting to me this week was about Burlington High School. Last year the gender-neutral bathroom passed. If it's single use, it is now gender-neutral. Anyone can use it. Well, Burlington High School went a step further, and it was at the request of one of their students. And they have taken what had been a referee's locker room that wasn't really being used, has a door that can be locked, private shower stall, and it is now going to be a gender-neutral locker room. And this young man who identifies as transgender had requested it, saying that it was really awkward and difficult to change in the traditional men's locker room. And as the article pointed out, if you are a trans man, you may have some binding that you need to wear. You need a greater degree of privacy. But what was also made me smile is the person who did this was Z. Totten, who was one of the people who, when he was a page at the State House, was involved in advocating for and testified in support of the neutral bathroom bill. So it was one of those indications that we may have some young activists coming up that we're going to want to be looking at and supporting. So now, are you going to take me back to violent places again?
Well, I'm going to take you to the Netherlands, where there's a lot of turmoil.
It's the
and
Netherlands.
When I was researching this story, I became acquainted with the infamous, horrific Nashville Statement, which was issued in August 2017, issued by a commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, originally signed by more than 150 evangelical Christian leaders. And this statement is really bad. Nashville disavowed it. All these groups objected to it. It was signed by so now it's been introduced to the Netherlands, where it's been signed by 250 hardline Protestant ministers. And this statement says that marriage is the covenantal, sexual, procreative, lifelong union of one man and one woman, and that it is sinful to approve of homosexual impunity or transgenderism. One of the signatories to the Nashville Statement in the Netherlands is MP Kees van der Staaij. leader of the Testimonial Party, which has 3 seats in Parliament and draws most of its support from the Dutch Bible Belt. I didn't know there was a Dutch Bible Belt.
That's
Me
where the
either.
Puritans came from. Remember?
That's right, so
Yeah.
you were saying. Well, opera singer Frances von Broekhuizen has filed a formal complaint against this MP, which is the first step toward prosecution. This opera singer, who is the Pride ambassador, said the whole pamphlet is a call to renew discrimination against LGBT people. I feel very hurt and very sad. Emancipation Minister Ingrid van Engelshoven described the emergence of a Dutch version of the Nashville Statement as a step back in time and evidence that emancipation is still a long way off. Dangerous. Around 200,000 people in the U.S., since it was initially issued, have signed the English version of the statement since it went live in 2017. Last year, research by the government's, back to the Netherlands, sociocultural think tank said members of the Protestant churches are among the least likely in society to accept homosexuality, with 16% saying they are negative about the LGBT community. The ruling party believes that the Netherlands should be, the SGP, the supporters of this statement, believe that the Netherlands should be governed entirely on the basis of the ordinances of God, as revealed in the Holy Scriptures. The party won 2.1% of the vote in the 2017.
So it's not a big majority.
It's not a big, yeah, but it's a vocal one. Despite its reputation as the bastion of liberal ideas and being the first country in the world to legalize gay marriage, the Netherlands has a large community, as evidenced, of fundamentalist Christians who oppose homosexuality and say that women should stay at home and raise children.
Oh, jeez.
In November, 2/3 of the Protestant churches in Zeeland municipality of Tholen launched a campaign against the use of the rainbow flag to support gay rights, saying Christian norms and values are being shoved to one side. But there was a response of a display of rainbow flags in many places in the Netherlands. Now, I have one more story from Amsterdam, if I may. 3 men who distributed hundreds of anti-gay flyers in the west of Amsterdam in October of 2016 have been fined €600 by judges in the Dutch capital. They were all found guilty of insult and inciting discrimination. The public prosecution department called for community service. The leaflet distributed in the west of the city said that homosexuality is forbidden by Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And it goes on to list a number of false facts about gay people. It includes a Facebook page focusing on a Romanian couple who are angry that their children were taken away from them and then adopted by a gay couple. The men, the culprits, said at the time that their aim had been to start a discussion and that their action fell under freedom of speech legislation. Dutch media suggested at the time that the leaflets were the work of supporters of a Turkish creationist named Yarun Haya. So I have many more stories.
Well, I don't think we're going to get to them, though.
Well, come back to me if you can. Or if you can't,
She's going to be there.
Yeah.
let me just, if you're over with me, I want to show a clip.
All right, we're over with you.
Well, there was good news from Cambodia. There was bad news from Cameroon. The Golden Globes had a horrible fake lesbian proposal that made me frantic with
Cringe.
angry.
It was cringe.
With anger. But now, on a peaceful note, I'd like to turn to the annual peace procession held by transgender Indians in Bhopal, India. It's a minute clip, but I thought since I've reported all this
Nasty.
violent news, we would end
Show a happy
on a more peaceful
dance.
note. Yes. So they come together every year, transgender people from all over India, and they marched together in support of peace. So let's see the minute clip of that.
And on a more bad news,
Back to the bad
I
news.
know, Democrat political donor Ed Buck,
Oh,
and apparently this is the second person,
Yes.
a young black person,
of which we're aware.
yes,
Yeah.
that we're aware of, found dead in his apartment. And there has been a young woman who has been doing a lot of work on trying to get the police to look more closely at this case. Her name is Jasmine Cornick, and she's been publishing accounts from many of his other alleged victims. Police found Timothy Dean in the apartment of Mr. Buck, but Cornick wasn't surprised. Just 6 months ago, Cornick said in her tweet, "If another young black gay man overdoses or worse at Mr. Buck's apartment, it's going to be the sheriff department's fault." In July 2017, Jamel Moore, 26, a black man, died from an overdose on meth in Bush's apartment.
Buck's
In
apartment.
Buck's apartment. Since Moore's death, Cornick has collected a trove of information in an attempt to make a case that Buck is a serial predator who plays on down and out young black men by inviting him to his house and suggests they try slamming. Buck's attorney says that Timothy Dean was a long life friend of Buck's and had asked to come over. And I guess we'll watch to see how this story develops. It seems a little weird. I don't know how many people have two
Young
dead
of
people.
color,
Yeah.
gay,
Dead. Two,
and opiate addicted.
yeah,
Of course. Yeah, okay.
that makes sense. How many have died? Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
anyway,
Fishy.
yeah. And transgender people are coming together for the aid of people who are furloughed by the federal government's layoffs, not layoffs,
Shutdown.
government shutdown. The Transgender Foundation of America has announced that they're going to use their disaster fund and will be accepting applications from the LGBTQ community for federal workers whose lives have been thrown into chaos during this government closure. So that's pretty good news. And a gay inmate dies of suicide after jail officials allegedly join other inmates in nonstop torture. Marcus Neal Middleton, 23, who was also bipolar, was found dead in his cell. He had used his bed linen to hang himself.
sheet, yeah.
Where?
Yeah. I don't know. And Ron DeSantis in Florida, governor, deliberately excludes LGBTQ people from non-discrimination policies.
His executive order.
Yes. So,
Can I barge
So-
right in and show you a picture of the Cambodia activists of the Rainbow Community Kampuchea Rock? It was initiated in 2009 by same-sex couples. Now they have 2,000 members, and they're pictured before you.
okay.
Thank you. That was pushy, but
Well, you know, it
So
works.
So as soon as Zach gets that picture moved over, he's gonna show you a picture of former Representative Kaya Morris of Bennington and Attorney General T.J. Donovan. And as people may be aware, Representative Morris has been subjected to repeated racial harassment over the last 4 years, at least the last 4 years, to which people have really not been able to do anything because it fell into that category of protected free speech versus hate speech. And what T.J. Donovan, as Attorney General, is proposing is that so that we have a clearer response, a better response, and better documentation, that any complaint of bias or hate-motivated crime will not only go to the local law enforcement, but it will be reported directly to a point person within his office, so that they will look at, okay, you may not be able to do a criminal suit, but there may be another type of civil suit that is possible for the individual. One of the things that was of note is they held a press conference yesterday in Bennington to talk about what it is that Kaya and her family had endured. TJ was presenting his proposal, law enforcement were talking about their response and what had made it difficult. You know, there was not a criminal act that had been committed for which the individual could be located or identified who is the perpetrator.
But he did give his name, right?
I'm not done.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm not done.
Oh, okay.
No, this
We're
was
just so pushy
the-
over here.
She's like that tonight. No, it's the criminal acts like the painting of the swastikas on the
Yeah.
tree, breaking into the house. They were never able to identify a perpetrator for that.
Okay.
The person who was doing the racial harassment is very open about it. Everyone knows who he is. He clearly says, yes, I'm the person doing it. He signs his name to it. He always uses his name. And he actually showed up at the press conference.
I am so appalled by that.
It was toward the end of the press conference. But this is one of the things that we need to get better at. The people who were at the press conference stood around him and opened their coats to basically sort of shield him, well, actually to protect Kaya from him,
Yeah.
so that she did not have to look at him. There was not an interaction. And then they looked at him and started singing, "This Little Light of Mine." It reminded me of the responses to Topeka, Kansas Baptist Church Phelps, where the angels would spread their wings and just be a barrier. So you may have noted that I haven't really talked a whole lot about politics. Well, that might be because you're about to see an interview with Senator Becca Balint of Windham County, who is the majority leader in the Senate. Hello, and what's becoming an annual tradition for us, we have Senator Becca Balint of Windham County. And before I forget, she writes a weekly column that we should all be reading for the Brattleboro Reformer. And then she says she posts it on the evil Facebook.
I do.
So
On the
welcome.
evil Facebook, yes. Thank you.
Congratulations on your reelection.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations on again being elected
Yes.
majority leader in the Senate.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the Senate.
Let's do.
Because last year, when you came toward the end of the session looking at things that were going on,
Right.
one of the things that you promised me, and I'm remembering the promises, was an equal rights amendment. So you're
Yes.
getting ready to do this,
We are.
but you're going to more than meet my expectation.
I sure hope so.
Okay, so why don't you...
Okay, so I thought what would be helpful for the viewers at home is
Okay.
if I just read the last part of the resolution that we introduced last year. I thought I would just read part of the resolution that is queuing up the Equal Rights Amendment that will be introduced so
Okay.
that you'll understand the scope. So it says, resolved by the Senate that the Senate of the State of Vermont encourages its members in 2019 to initiate a Vermont constitutional amendment to read as follows. Equal protection under the law shall not be denied or abridged because of race, sex, age, religion, creed, color, familial status, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or national origin.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And so it's going to be introduced coupled, we believe. It might be separate, but right now it's coupled with an amendment that also guarantees a woman's right to choose.
That was
So,
going to be one of the
yes.
other things that,
Incredibly important to us.
for me,
Yeah.
from having been an activist low these too many
Yeah.
years, one of the things that I have always been concerned about is that our opposition has watched as we have made gains.
Yes.
And looking at what's happened on the federal level, our opposition paid attention.
Yes, they did.
Because they're trying to undo them in exactly the same manner
Yes.
in which we achieved them.
Yes,
By putting this into the state constitution, they can't take that away.
exactly.
These are guaranteed protections.
That's right.
And I think for those of us who have lived without it and knew the real impact,
Yeah.
we know how essential this is. But I was concerned that people coming after us may not fully appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And a women's
Yeah.
right to choose, having that in there, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, we have watched, let me back up.
Yeah.
Because this, like, it still galls me.
Yeah.
Okay, we're years into this administration, but it still galls me. In the lead up to the election, the 2016 election, I did an interview with a reporter. Can't remember which paper in Brattleboro, and he said, so for you, like, what's the bottom line issue heading into this election? Like, are you Bernie? Are you Hillary? Or I said, look, Supreme Court, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm watching whoever gets the nomination has my vote, has my time, has my money, because the Supreme Court is my most important issue. And he confided in me a few months ago, the same reporter, he said, I didn't know what you meant.
Now I do.
Yeah, now I do. And so
I've seen
all
it.
the things that we feared have come to pass, especially with the Kavanaugh nomination, that we are in danger of losing the protections of Roe v. Wade. And I think those folks, my constituents who were not alive for that landmark ruling, have just assumed it's been codified, there is no real danger. And so I know those of us in the Senate feel like the danger is real, and we want to make sure that women in Vermont absolutely have these protections.
I remember a very committed group of women in Burlington who used to drive women from Vermont to New York because it was their only option.
That's right.
It was their only safe option.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But
this is
you're-
very exciting.
You're not just doing constitutional amendments. You're on economic development and then also on finance
That's
committee
right.
in the Senate.
Yeah.
You're going to be looking at minimum wage and paid family leave,
We are.
which
We're
got passed but vetoed last
passed but
session.
vetoed. As I'm sure you heard the news, we picked up a few members in the House who are now on the.
And you got a surprise in the Senate.
We did.
Out of Rutland.
We sure did. That was Cheryl
work.
Hooker. It was a real wonderful gift.
Exactly.
And it's kind of funny because she didn't actually campaign. You know the story? She was out of the
No.
country for most of the election.
Was she really?
I think that's the secret. If you want to get elected,
Stay away.
Stay away. But she's going to be wonderful. She was in the
I'm
Senate.
taking notes.
Yeah, well, she was in the Senate 20 years ago, and so she's returning. But she put her name in. And
Well, I
she- you know,
remembered her from
yeah.
20 years ago and
Yeah.
was so happy that she was
Yeah,
coming
she's
back.
going to be great. We're really
Okay.
excited for her. And for us.
Minimum wage, still
Paid
looking
family
at
leave medical insurance as well. Yep.
$15 an hour
Yep.
by which year?
Well, that's
Because that was the real sort of negotiating part that people were looking at during the last session.
right. And we, as you know, the first part of the session is bringing new members up to speed.
Yep.
So we haven't taken the bill up yet. And so my assumption is Senator Sorokin, who's the chair,
Right.
is going to probably introduce the work that we did last year as a starting point.
Saying this is what we did and this is
And
how we
so
approached it.
This, right. And so I want to just take a moment. I met with this woman this morning, Saru, actually I don't know quite how to pronounce her last name, so I'm going to mangle it, Jayaraman, who is a professor at UC Berkeley, brilliant woman, has done a ton of work on the tipped minimum wage. And so one of the things, so we met with her this morning for her to bring us up to speed, because oftentimes the tip minimum wage does not get included in these
Right.
initial bills. And what she was getting us to see is these are
Essential.
overwhelmingly women. These are overwhelmingly, women who are already not making a lot of money and are experiencing much more sexual harassment on the job than just about any other line
And
of
they're
work.
enduring it because they need
Because of
the
tips.
employment.
Exactly.
And so
this is going to add an interesting dimension to the discussion because we hadn't
there was a piece of it during the last session, but it wasn't extensive,
exactly
as I recall.
because we
Okay.
could not get consensus on it,
Okay.
and so this is going to be an interesting piece.
Now, the paid family leave, I noted that when the governor gave his inaugural address, he made an emphasis on referencing family leave
Yeah.
while he was talking about how you all could now work together.
Yes.
But he identified it as voluntary
Right.
family leave, which I immediately said, okay, so what is the distinction? If it's voluntary, how does it work? Who is contributing and who really benefits from it? And does it really meet the outcomes that people have?
Right, or does it pass the straight face test is
Well,
how I
that's-
like to say it.
that- yeah.
And so,
The laugh factor is what,
yeah. So here's what we know. These systems only work if you have everybody paying in, right? We know this. And
It's like the risk pools for insurance.
exactly. That's exactly right. Now, my understanding, because I just heard this from an advocate in the State House who's been working on this issue for years, that there's going to be some kind of rollout from the governor tomorrow. And I think he's going to introduce a plan that's going to be Vermont coupled with another state. There's going to be a
Hampshire.
bi-state, probably,
Yeah.
bi-state compact around this so that they can get more people in but keep it voluntary. And I know that we in committee feel pretty confident that that is still not going to give you enough in the pool for people to actually be able to take the number of weeks that we want people to be able to take through the program. So we are, of course, welcoming the governor's olive branch, and he's not hitting us with it, so that's good. We welcome it. And so I don't want to
He's not
shut,
hiding it behind his
That's right.
back, waiting until
So-
a later time to.
as the majority leader, I'm really working on not being overly partisan right out of the gate. I want to hear what he has to say.
Give me your
it's
best
great
offers
that,
and-
right. But as we were saying before, the bill as we passed it was not going to be a hardship.
Right.
We're talking about
You
a
were
penny
saying-
and a half per pay period. And so it
Per
is
employee.
per employee, exactly. And so for a minimum wage employee. And so
That seems minimal to
it
me.
is. So I have to just say, I
Okay.
have to just say, because there was this wonderful moment on the floor of the Senate last year when we're introducing it. And my committee is giving testimony, and a Republican senator stood up, and I will not throw her under the bus, but a Republican senator
Yeah.
stood up. She's reading the details, and she's going through it, and she's asking the questions, and she's saying, "I don't know why we're not supporting this." And the other Republicans in the room were like, "Sit down."
Like-
But she was like, honestly, like, it seems like
What is there not to like about
it
this?
was so awesome. She's like, "Am I missing something, Mr. President?" It was like, "No, you're
Yeah,
not."
you're missing what's coming out of the fifth floor. And you also made a reference to insurance?
So it's called the Family Medical Leave Insurance
Okay.
Program. So it's just family medical leave. It's
Okay.
because it's an insurance program. You're paying in to get back later on. So.
But are
yeah.
you going to be doing something about insurance coverage this year?
Well,
or-
so I was just talking in economic development this morning
Uh-huh.
and in finance this afternoon. We're going to continue to look at insurance rates in the
Okay.
state. Absolutely. But something else that we didn't mention that is a huge issue for me, and I know a lot of the queers out there who like to use the internets and their cell phones, is telecommunications.
Yep.
And so it is my number one issue in finance this year, is that we have got to get better coverage for rural areas, or we're going to continue to see decline
and
economically in those areas.
continued protections, and looking at what they're doing with your information and
Oh, absolutely. We first in the nation,
Yeah.
data brokers bill. So definitely Google that. We were the first in the nation to say that we needed to regulate data brokers who are selling our private information. Yeah.
So, a lot of publicity within the last couple of days with Kaya Morris in Bennington. Press conference where T.J. Donovan was talking about these are the new protocols we're going to try and do
Right.
to make sure that we as the state are more responsive. And then the person who was harassing her
Right.
showed up. And there was a whole conversation about free speech,
Right.
public environments, et cetera. Are people in the legislature looking at trying to revisit all of that sort of bias, hate crimes? When does free speech become hate speech, and when do people have a private right
Right.
of action?
And so there's a couple different things. One, we as a legislature need to come up to speed about the Attorney General's plan, because
Yep.
this was all new. And so I know that's very high on the list of things that we need to look at as a caucus. So I organize the caucus. I can't speak for the
Right.
Senate as a whole, and that we want to understand how that bias reporting system will work. And once you've reported it, then
What
essentially
happens?
what happens then. And
And for all of us, both legislators and
Right.
the public in general, where truly is the line?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Right, between free speech and harassment,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I haven't read the report yet from the AG's office. I'm eager to read it and try to parse out what the distinction was that was made there. I think an important thing for you to know is, as a House and a Senate, we've been in communication about this issue from the moment that Kaya decided to resign. And that we're looking at, so you probably saw in the news that the House, Speaker of the House decided to remove personal home information
Yes.
from the legislative website. And that's not necessarily a permanent decision. She felt like enough of her members were being threatened. And
targeted
yes, and I think that this is
from multiple sides.
absolutely. And
Because
I
I
think,
noticed the first 3 bills introduced into the Senate were all firearms related. So
yes,
you're
that-
going to be revisiting that again, and there's so much emotion attached to
so
that.
much emotion, and it goes to, as we saw in Senate testimony, in front of the committee and also on the floor, was that it goes to culture issues in Vermont, and what does it mean to be a Vermonter? And
It's
so this
that
is like,
deep-rooted, not
it's
rational.
it's very deep rooted. And so, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I said today is that
In our last minute.
exactly, in our last minute, is that one of the things that I know I do for Vermont by being in the Senate as an out lesbian in leadership is the visibility that I have is an incredible gift.
Yeah.
I've had parents come up to me, pages in the building, people who work in the building say to me, "You don't know what it means to me to have you here, because I feel like I finally have a place in this building." And it's huge.
You're what shows what is possible,
Yeah.
what it is that I can achieve, and I can knock down those barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank
and,
you.
and our time has already flown by. So
It's so
we're
fleeting.
going to have to
Yeah.
look at, checking in before the session ends about, okay, so what happened that we didn't expect?
Exactly.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation, as always.
I always
Great
love when
insight.
she's on. I really always love when she's on.
And you couldn't see the spectacular hose, and you'll have to ask her about that. So our trivia question, and that wasn't the, there's no place for the state in the bedrooms of the nation. What's done in private between adults does not concern the criminal code. It was said in 1969 by then
You'll
Premier
never get it.
then Premier Pierre Trudeau, when he made a proposal to amend the criminal code to remove consensual same-sex sexual practices. And why this might be the trivia question this week is that Justin Trudeau may have just authorized the issuing of a 50th year commemoration of the repeal or the amendment of that criminal code that will be LGBTQ positive. And you should be seeing a picture of Justin and Pierre as I say, thank you for joining us.
Was Pierre his father?
Pierre
Yeah,
was his father.
In the 60s?
Yeah.
69 is when he
69,
made the
yeah.
statement.
Well,
Yeah.
he did 2 terms as Premier of Canada.
Uh-huh.
So we're hoping in 2 weeks you're going to come back again because we've got another great interview coming up. And I'll tell you more about contra dancing.
Who's coming next week?
Beverly Little Thunder.
There you go.
Let's
Yeah.
So, and as Linda says,
What we must do continuously until Trump is gone, well,
And
until
after that.
and after that is resist.